Come back to school. Hey, so today I want to talk a little bit about the power of B2B podcasting. So, if you think about podcasting as a way to attract people towards you, it's a great way to start a conversation with people. I mean, if you think about, most of the interactions a lot of us have today centered around, some sort of topic that gets you to that first step, right? Of how do I get a conversation with somebody where it's not that they take the impression that I want to sell something to somebody. It's funny because I just had an introduction on LinkedIn where it went like this. It was the person initially said, look, they're interested in connecting with me. Then of course the next step is not the connection really doesn't do anything for you, right? I know your bio and I know kind of the elements of the things that you might have worked on. I'd like to know a little bit more, right? So that, I mean, to be fair, for anybody that's in my network, where the real value comes from is when they go move to that next step and they allow me then to actually have a live conversation. I had a live conversation with somebody earlier this week where I just said, look, I don't think there's anything that I can, sell to you. It's not like I really think that there's something that I have for you to offer. But you might get value actually for joining my free school community. The link for that, by the way, should be under the description for this video. But because I'm putting it out on YouTube at the same time that I'm talking on school, for anybody that wants to know that, I'm going to go through those sort of techniques as I talk about podcasting. It's going to be a series of videos that I do about this topic. And I'm building a course inside of my paid community that really focuses in on podcasting and using B2B podcasting as a way to connect with people. But the real sort of connection here is that um, through that conversation, that individual is going to join the free community. And so look, I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. I just genuinely want to have conversations. Now, if there's a fit, if there's a direct business fit, obviously I'm going to say that there's something that I could do to help with the thing that I can work on. And one of the things most people say to me most often is they find out that I could do one thing, then the next, then the next, and we're just sort of contributing in a continuum of ways. I've got people on my team that also help. And we help people in a variety of ways. And the main reason why I want to just have the conversation, one is to educate people about what I do, but also really ultimately want to hear what it is that they're doing so that I can understand better. I have a large network on especially LinkedIn, and I can connect a lot of people that way. But also, just in general, in terms of business relationships, there's a great way that we could focus there as well. And so, one of the things that I feel like people don't do themselves a lot of great service is whenever they think everybody is trying to sell them something, all the answers are no. Um, I feel like I say yes more often. I probably like I don't know greater than 50%. I say yes. There's still the people that come to me and say, "Hey, look, I want I want to do white label um, digital marketing services for your business?" The answer to that most of the time is no. Occasionally, I'll have a conversation with somebody that might be a good web developer, have some skill set that we don't really focus on in the agency, and then there might be a good relationship there. There's also advantages sometimes, to just having in general a conversation with somebody that you might not even think will fit. And honestly, interestingly enough, one of the most valuable conversations and relationships that I've built over the last 4 or 5 years has been with somebody that's totally out of my industry that really isn't a very good fit for my business. But at the same time, this person has brought more relationships to me, and I've contributed back to him. And I feel like there's a great sort of bi-directional relationship, overall. But that wouldn't have happened if I would have just said no, because there's no real way to connect. And I really think podcasts are a great way to do it, right? So you could, with a podcast, you could go to somebody and say, hey, look, I want to connect to you. And the reason why is because I want to interview you. I saw somebody else say something similar. they said, "Hey, look, I'm teaching for XX university, or I'm somebody who develops content, or I'm somebody, who helps businesses in a certain way, and I am doing a case study, or I'm doing a white paper, or I'm, doing whatever." And those things as well could be good, things. I would imagine you probably get more no's than with a podcast, even because right now, I mean, even just with this thing, I'm generating content. I'm creating content that I can reuse, that I can keep putting out there, and keep sort of showing people the stuff that I can do, and in terms of helping businesses. So you kind of think about the ways that your business might be able to help people. There might be a good way, again, another good relationship, that you can use to just say, "Hey, look, this is an intro. This is something that I can do to contribute to you." The things that I know that don't work for my business today is that if we came back to people and said, "Hey, look, we want to do a an assessment of your website, or we want to offer you an SEO sort of assessment on where you currently rank," all those things sort of fall flat. I mean, to be honest, they fall flat. But whenever I say podcast to people, or I built the number one rated life sciences podcast, over 500 interviews, all built on relationships that I built first on LinkedIn through a connection where I said to a life sciences leader primarily, "Hey, would you want to be on my podcast?" That then led to bigger agencies coming to me and saying, "Hey, we want our people to be on your podcast," so much so that I eventually had to turn that off. I had to stop them from sending people, because there were just so much work that I was doing for other people, and they were much shallower relationships, I would say, than ones that actually were ones that I could leverage, right? So I need relationships that I can build, that where the person actually sees kind of a bi-directional thing, not that they paid some vendor some dollar amount to get them on my show. They got them on my show, and now they come and go, and that's it. I mean, if there's no relationship there, then I just don't really see why there's a benefit, why you would want to do that. But that'll kind of be some of the stuff that we get into today is, let's just deep dive a little bit deeper into the power of B2B podcasting. So, and talk about, some of these topics. So, first of all, B2B podcasting really builds your authority in your industry. So, I do want to sort of focus in on this for a minute, because I've been told that people are surprised in terms of all the things that they think that I know, um, in my industry. The reality is I don't know all of these things. So that is the reality that I feel like a lot of a lot of people just may or may not fully understand, right? Is that I overall, I know my core competencies. I know that I'm a great executor. I know that I can contribute in a lot of different ways to helping companies succeed. But at the end of the day, I'm not the sort of person who is a great salesperson. I'm not the sort of person who really does a great job in helping companies. At the end of the day, show up. When it comes to sales. So I like to be transparent about that sort of thing, and so I just want to make sure that at the end of the day, I'm contributing where I think that I can be most useful. And if I can't, then, look, I'm not going to, spend a lot of time there. So that's that. Uh, I also, would say that I am somebody that can really help companies whenever it comes to execution. The whenever it comes to the execution side of things, that's someplace that I can definitely help people as well, and so it helps to foster those new business relationships. Podcasting does in really helping you walk through and help people with that. Um, Only doing that though. Wait, I know. case anybody's wondering, in case anybody happens to be watching, this is an edit point for my video editor because I am seeing a reverse slide on school on the output. So let me see what the settings are here. Don't like it when things go one way on one platform and then on the other go an entirely different way. I'm just going to drag this over here. All right. Ecamm. Don't need your custom backgrounds. And they don't offer me a way to flip it. So now you get that because it's showing on the screen. Let me move it back over here. Also don't like the square. There we go, enter full screen, but it's backwards on the other platform. I'm going to do one last thing, and then if this doesn't work, I'm just going to stop on school and I will post the video when I'm done. That's what I'm going to do. I'm not seeing this be useful. All right. Looking like I have to do a test of some sort. Why don't I there's that window. That is so weird. All I could do is go back and watch the video here later. It's already odd enough. It shows up in a square versus backwards, or square versus, which is fine for live calls, I think. But when you're sharing slides, it's just not an optimal environment. So look, folks, I'm gonna quit the live on here on school. Hang up. There we go. That's that. I'll close it and I'm going to continue from here. All right, so I'm just going to redo this entire section again for anybody that's watching live. You just get to see it again. So why B2B podcasting? The reality here is that it builds authority in your industry. I've had people come up to me and say that they're surprised at all the things that I know, but the reality is I'm interviewing really smart leaders. And so whenever you think about it, I mean, if you invite the right guest and they're an authority in their space, or you're knowledgeable enough to kind of extract information out of them, it definitely helps you. It can foster new business relationships. I've had it happen where, I don't typically work on or get sponsorships. It's not something that I have felt is very successful for my business. And so for that, the way I've approached this is that I really want to focus in on companies that I can contribute to them in a way that's actually beneficial to them. And so that's the way I approach this. And then in terms of creating value, it certainly creates a pipeline of potential prospects for your business as well. And then, I honestly, through podcasting, it's been great because I've gotten into conversations with podcasting. I've gotten into conversations that I honestly probably wouldn't have had a chance to get into otherwise. And so with that, it's been a real benefit for my business. Additionally, you kind of look at, it's really not just about the content. It's about really building relationships and creating conversations that matter. And from my perspective, that is the real reality in this, is that you can move to real in-depth conversations that can impact your business. You really want to focus in on, what is it that you want to have out of a podcast, though? Because I've told somebody this just recently, that if you don't start with the idea in mind of what it is that you want out of the podcast, the output definitely is not going to match. And so it becomes a really hard thing to carry forward from that perspective. And you want to make sure that at the end of the day, if your goal is to get leads, then start with that lead idea in mind. Like, who is it that you want? What questions do you want to ask the people? What then leads them from the point of being just an interview to that next step of saying, hey, look, I think I can actually help you with the problem that you have. And the only way you're going to get to that is with that end in mind, because I could tell you there's lots of ways that you can have a conversation and not get to the end goal. And I would imagine a lot of sales leaders would tell you that as well. Again, I just said it a little bit ago. Sales is not my real strong suit. And so I'm somebody who likes to build a relationship. I want to connect. I want to, really connect with people that I think at the end of the day can buy this product or service that I have. I don't want to have a lot of conversations with people that I don't think make a good fit in terms of the latest podcast that I created. um, what sort of challenges do your ideal listeners face? So you want to make sure that you face into that as well, because unless you talk about the things that people need in the end, it again isn't going to be a good tie. You want to make sure too that you position your podcast as a valuable resource. I mentioned this a little bit ago, right? I have the #1 life sciences podcast. I also, would tell you that in my journey of building my podcast, the one thing that I had was I came back a couple of times and said, look, I think I'm going to stop. I think, this idea of inviting guests and all this kind of stuff, it provides awful lot of work. I'm going to show some systems that I have that help with that work. But at the end of the day, these things are not easy things to carry out without doing some level of work. Um, Here's the podcast that I have for life sciences. So this is Life Science Success. This is the podcasting platform that I have. It's called Buzzsprout is the platform that I use, and so this is the page for that podcast. And then similarly, I've got another podcast called Growth Revealed. So that one is Growth Revealed VIP, and this is that podcast. And so I've only got a couple episodes here. There's not a lot currently built out on that one, but again, I'm sort of building there, and the whole idea is build and then create a platform where I can have guests come in that would be good leads, but I'm honestly inviting them for a genuine conversation first. So I'm not starting with how do I get paid out of this first, because if you're starting with that, then look, I don't think it's excuse me, I don't think it's going to be as easy to get people um, into your podcast. I think you're going to have a really tough time getting those people in. And so you just want to be, honest with yourself and understand, like, look, have a, um, do I need to have a service maybe that goes out and helps me find guests? Because if you had a service that helped you do it, then maybe you can get paid more paid deals out of it. But you need a lead generation service then to help you. And that's not what I'm talking about here. Instead, I'm saying you can use your podcast as a lead generation service and and bring people in that way. And I think there's a real legitimate way to bring people in and not be too pushy or salesy or anything like that. But there's an opportunity to make your podcast a resource for people so that whenever they come, they're coming with the idea of, hey, look, I want to learn about the thing that your podcast is mainly about. So some of the strong purposes that you could have could be, I want to uncover success secrets from industry leaders. I want to help mid-sized companies overcome growth hurdles. I want to demystify the future of B2B sales technology. Again, I said this is not my area of expertise, but I think there are ways to sort of say, hey, look, I want to extract from people some ideas or ways to learn from them, and that could be your real benefit for your particular podcast. And you should just think about it that way. Um, to know your audience is the key to really impactful storytelling. And Ann Henley said this, but the way I kind of come back to it from my history and my childhood is I remember watching Johnny Carson as a kid with my dad. I remember then later on in life watching David Letterman extract some of the greatest stuff out of people in a lighthearted, humorous way in a lot of cases. And I just felt like he was a real personality to learn from. Later on, he has his Netflix show. You kind of watch some of the pieces now that are not as structured and corporate, now become a part of something that's a real conversation that he's having with people. I think it's called In the Actors Guild is another, great sort of interview show that I remember watching and just loved, some of the elements. And I've taken from that and just said, hey, look, how do I build these things into my own podcast? But also, that's how I'm using that to extract the most uh, the most impactful storytelling that I can think of with people. Um, so one of the questions that I get a lot of times is, well, okay, so I have this idea. I want to have a podcast. And with the podcast, I want to interview guests. How do I get them on my show? So let's talk through some of the ways that these things come about. So first of all, you don't have to have guests to have a successful podcast. There are plenty of people that sit there week after week and talk about a topic similar to what I'm doing here. So you find a really engaging topic and you sit down and you're the person sharing the thing. Now I would say nobody wants to stay in theory forever, and we're going to make sure we move out of theory here pretty soon. And we're going to get back to tactics in just a second, because I don't like these sort of things either. I want to sort of talk about the theory and how I do things, but then I want to quickly shift into how do I put this into practice as well. And so we'll get back to that in 1 second here. So think about it that way. How do you have kind of, a conversation with a camera to tell the story of the thing that you want to talk about? That's one thing. No, the second thing is pick a buddy, like whoever your counterpart is, or maybe you do one thing really well and somebody else does another thing really well, and you guys can have a conversation about how that thing flows back and forth, or how something starts at one point and moves to another, and how you could be successful together. Now maybe the conversation could be you ask questions of your counterpart for half of the show, and the other half of the show they ask questions of you. You make it about the both of you and you sort of tie the pieces together. Maybe that's how you tell the story. You don't have to have guests is my main point here. And I think a lot of people get hung up on different elements. One is, I don't understand the technology. I don't understand how to put the pieces together. I don't understand how to get guests. All of those things at the end of the day are excuses. And most of us have been on Zoom calls where we've had to explain the thing that we do. And so you're having to do this all the time anyway. And I would sort of challenge anybody, to walk that back and go, okay, well, how do I stop making excuses and this week get on the, get on video or get on, audio and get started, overall with your podcast. So look, the best guests for my sort of shows are like C-suite executives and founders. They're industry thought leaders, they're strategic partners and top customers, they're influencers in my business vertical. However, if I'm going to come back to that idea of I want to use a podcast for lead generation, think of it this way. You have to have shows that kind of tie to the main theme that you're talking about. Growth Revealed is all about sales and marketing success. What did somebody do to actually be successful in sales and marketing? That means that I'm going to invite people that aren't very good fits for clients all the time. That means I'm going to invite industry thought leaders. I'm going to invite people that make a really interesting story and podcast. Why? Because I want people not just to listen to the episodes where I'm trying to, talk to somebody about something that I can do, but instead also have a show where I'm providing some real value. So that's the reason why you want to think through like who are all of these guests and how is it that they actually contribute to the overall story that you have. How do you find them? I find mine through these three ways. I I look on LinkedIn and industry events and networking. So I definitely use that top bullet 90+% of the time. Referrals from previous guests certainly come in. I also mentioned that there were other, marketing agencies and other things that wanted to send me people as my podcast got more and more successful. All of a sudden, more and more people started showing up, just saying, "Hey, look, I think another good guest would be X, Y, and Z." And then also talk about people that had recent achievements. So I'm going to tell a little bit of a story here in terms of how I got my first guest on my first podcast. So I was having a conversation with somebody, and they happened to mention the fact that they wish that they had recorded the conversation with me. That to me sort of registered podcast. That's how I got guest number one. How do you get guest number 2 then? Because, I mean, I was having a conversation with that first person. Am I only gonna invite people that I'm talking to on a weekly basis? These are all things that I wondered about whenever I started my first podcast. The way that then I turned this around was there were industry magazines focusing on the industry that I was in. And so what I would do is start flipping through the pages, finding people that had articles written about them, reaching out to those people on LinkedIn and saying, "Hey, I saw your article. I have a podcast. Would you come on and be a guest?" And person after person started saying yes. And even famous authors would say yes. And so look, this strategy works. It's just a matter of, finding those people that are reachable that want to be in your category. Now, you have to also sort of keep in mind that you can't have something that's, way disconnected either, right? So somebody's way out of your league, CEO of a multi-billion dollar company, and you want to have them on your brand new podcast where you've had two people, most likely that's not going to happen. Unless they've got friends and friends, and you've got some level of connection, and all of that draws the person in, it's just not going to happen. If you have a multi-million dollar or billion-dollar podcast, maybe that happens because now all of a sudden that's all you talk to are millionaires and billionaires. I think there is a way to make it happen, but I also want to be realistic with people and just say, hey, look, the idea of setting yourself up in a league that you're in and saying, hey, look, I'm going to pick an industry magazine, and whatever industry I'm in, I'm going to start inviting people based on things that are there. Makes sense. People are getting published because they want publicity. They want publicity because they want to do stuff for their business. Now you invite them to your podcast, most likely they're going to say yes. I mean, the reason why they're going to say yes is because they want the publicity from you, and you're going to help them by creating a video or an audio element or whatever. You also want to really think about how do I brainstorm myself into the way of getting compelling topics out of people. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that I do to make sure that this happens. I actually used to only do it with people, so meaning that I had people that would do research on potential guests. I don't do that anymore. I have other ways of getting this done. What makes a topic really compelling? So, I mean, you want it to be relevant for your audience's needs. You're doing this to draw an audience in, so that then you could say, "Hey, look, I have a game changing podcast. You want to be on there? Yeah, sure. Let's build a relationship. Let me talk a little bit about some of the things that we're going to cover." And you go talk about that. You want to cover industry trends or pain points. You also want to talk about personal stories and transformation and innovation. Look, I built my whole life sciences podcast all around this whole idea of, talking to people at a personal level and like connecting with them personally about what is your company? What was your career like? Why did you make this decision? Why did you go that way? All of those sort of things are what really, built my last podcast. And you want to brainstorm your topics. You want to say, hey, look, what really is disrupting the market? Let's make sure we talk about that. Any sort of leadership lessons from the front line? How can I learn from you? How can I extract some of those things from you that I can learn from? One of the things that, I so at the end of every episode of Life Science Success, one of the things that I talk about is what's the number one piece of leadership advice that you ever got? And so from that, I'm listening for, what is it that people really sort of hinge their career on? Then we talk about what inspires them, what concerns them, and what excites them. And so all three of those things get a little bit deeper into like who they are as a person, so that I can again understand them much more and connect much more on a personal level, which is helpful from a podcasting perspective, and it's also helpful from a business and personal perspective. Your outreach strategy really should focus, I think, in the B2B space, it should really focus on people on LinkedIn. You really want to personalize, though, those invitations. So the way I do it currently is I have a bit of software that sends a message to connect with a person online. Then once they accept the connection, then I write back with, "Hey, I think you'd be a really good fit for my podcast. Are you interested? Yes or no?" If they're interested, then it moves to, I would like your email address because I want to take them off of the platform that we're on. And so I don't want to stay on the platform that we're on. I want to move them off on purpose so that I can get to that next level of the conversation and I have their direct email address. I don't want to keep it on any of the platforms, whether you're doing this on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or even LinkedIn. You want to make sure that you move the person off of that platform, just so that you can have a direct one-to-one conversation with them where it's not dependent on the platform. Because if you stay that way, then you're forever committed to the platform. And there's ups and downs, I feel like, with social media platforms, but the one thing that I like to do is to get to that personal level. They don't want to give up their email address, then fine. I don't have to have them as a guest, right? You want to clearly outline the benefit to them. Look, I'm going to do this in a way, and I've got X amount of followers on LinkedIn. And by the way, I'm going to broadcast it on LinkedIn while we're live. I'm going to take the clips of the episodes and I'm going to repost those and share them. I'll share them with all of my audience, and maybe I give you the video and the clips, and you could go share it with your audience as well. And so think through those things, like what is the real benefit at the end of the day? Because if all it is a conversation, again, you're giving people a reason to say no, and they just might say no. So if you provide the benefit, that helps. You want to show, what is the podcast value in the audience. So, like I said, I'm building a brand new podcast, and so the messages for those have been, "Hey, look, I built the number one podcast in life sciences, and I did it from nothing, and I'm going to do it again with this show. Wouldn't you like to be one of the people that's first on board and first, interviewed, so that you can continually say to people, 'Hey, look, I was with this person. They created two of the top, podcast in industry, and here's how they did it.'" you want to make participation simple and convenient. So we're going to skip here and we're going to talk a little bit about technology. I told you we're going to move from theory back over to, how these things happen. So, when I said before that I ask people for their email address, the very next step that happens is I have somebody on my team send them this podcast release form. And with the podcast release form, essentially all it's doing is asking them the things that I need to be able to conduct the interview, but it also sort of gives me the release to be able to do social media posts for them, reuse the video in any way that I want, all of those sort of things. So, if you really want to explore this release idea, I'm not a lawyer, and I can't give legal advice, but I can tell you that at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're protected in terms of the video that you create, especially whenever it involves companies and people in the public eye. Because at the end of the day, if they decide, hey, look, I don't like the way that this thing looks or the way that I come across, and I don't just want this thing removed. Because if somebody came to me and said, hey, look, I don't like this episode at all, I wish you'd delete it, I'd delete it. I mean, I would have no issue, no problem whatsoever. I'll delete it, and I'll never post another thing about it, and that's not a problem. But if all of a sudden, this turned into a lawsuit where they're, involving you for something that, that you did for free, based on your own goodwill, I also don't want to be involved in that. So I want to make sure that the advice that people get is solid legal advice, but you want to be protected and have some sort of a guest release agreement for the video, any sort of, you know, social media segments that you're creating, etc. So they fill this thing out. What's the next thing that happens? Well, the next thing that happens is I have a series of automations that are built inside of my CRM. This is Connector. It's Go High Level. At the end of the day, we have a branded version of Go High Level that we work with our clients on, and happy to talk to anybody that wants to talk about this platform and how you use it for your podcast. But you could see this is Growth Reveal. I got 22 people so far that are scheduled right now on the platform. I have 15 people that submitted the form, like, just amazing. I have 7 people that are currently getting email reminders from the system, right? So these things are all sort of set up in advance. And so the idea is like, let's have an automation. Hold on one second. Let me enable autosave. There we go, like that. So you could see this first one very short. Minute that somebody says yes, I want to be involved, I have some things that are happening to actually do some of the next steps, which is, look, I want to be able to move people into this system so that I get their album cover, I get all the things, all the elements set up for them so that they're properly, all set to go. So you could see fractional chief marketing officer. Looks to me like yeah, oh, it seems to me like he might have filled this out before, and so he didn't give me a real bio. But you could see then my automation then goes through and creates questions for him, and then also at the end, it sort of puts up here as well, a really nice album cover that goes with an article that we write about the guest after the episode. And so Michael is, coming up on the episode on the list of future guests. And so all of these things have to be thought through. How do I want my question structured? How do I want the overall interview to go? Because if I don't really think through that up front, the unfortunate thing that will happen is that we will wind up in a situation where it's not easy on the guest on the back end. And so my whole idea is I want to be able to provide for a guest a list of questions and make this so simple. All they got to do is just show up and we do the interview and it's done. So the example that I just provided, right, was, how do I personalize their greeting and context? Why is it that I chose them? What's in it for them? How do I make the scheduling flexible and things like that. So let me come back to this list for the release, right? So the person goes through and they fill this out. The very next thing that comes up is a calendar link. And from that calendar link, they could pick their date that they want to be scheduled. And so I only do podcast recordings at certain times. It's whenever I'm not active with other clients. And so, I'm really careful about making sure that I've got my calendar appropriately set aside. And this is how that happens. Um, you really want to make sure that you get that first impression right. You want people to walk away with, man, this felt so solid. I feel like I am able to walk in and just get this interview done, and love the fact that I can be on this podcast. That's what you want them to walk away with. You're gonna At the end of the day, you need to produce some level of high quality value content. And the way that you're going to do that is you're going to record your podcast potentially in multiple methods, right? So my first podcast started out as an audio only podcast, and I moved to video second. But I started out certainly just on audio, and you don't have to do video. It's not a must. There's another way that you could do video. So you could do Zoom call. I wasn't a big fan of doing the Zoom call podcast, so that wasn't my method of doing it. There are people that do them on Riverside. I think it's called Riverside FM. So you could certainly, try that platform. The thing that I'm using right now for switching slides and things like that is called Ecamm. Ecamm connects to Zoom, but makes a Zoom call not look like a Zoom call because it'll allow me the switching capability. I can do backgrounds and lower thirds and all those sorts of things and make it look really nice. Just briefly, I'm gonna bring up a couple of screens that are gonna look a little different for you, but the reason why is because I just want you to get a sense of what does it look like whenever I do my podcast. Well, whenever I do the podcast, this is an example of what a podcast would look like for my normal show. So whenever I do Life Science Success, this is how things look there. I have the background that's kind of moving, that's out on those. Let me try and get my fingers on the right side there, out on the outer side. So it's like a DNA helix. It kind of circulates back and forth. This is the single shot. So this is what it looks like whenever I'm doing the intro for the person. And the whole idea is to provide that brand identity, right? To make it, clear to people exactly what podcast I'm doing, because I do multiple things that are live, especially on LinkedIn. Then whenever the guest is here, they're over on that side. So they're over on that side. So, it's one of those things where you do this side by side kind of thing. And you think about like a news broadcast, or whenever people are remote, this is what we're all used to. But at the end of the day, what I want the feeling to be is like you're in a conversation. You're sitting across the table from two people having a conversation, and you're kind of getting that opportunity to listen in or watch from the outside. And that's the whole idea of those sort of scenes, is to have it so that it's really easy to connect with people. And video allows me that capability. And then look, if you want to listen and walk around, I provide the audio podcast too. I mentioned Buzzsprout at the beginning. That's how I distribute um, that podcast. So just to kind of come back here and finish up really quickly. So you want to think about whatever your level of technology is. You want to have that walkthrough. You want to make sure that it's crisp audio, professional editing. I tell people all the time on my normal podcast that when you come on the show, I want to make sure that you have headphones. I want to make sure that you have a good microphone and all of that stuff. I still have people that show up, unfortunately, that they'll have their laptop sitting on their desk and there's an echo in the room and I'm echoing, back to myself, and I can hear it. And I tell people, without that crisp audio, it takes away 50% or more of the presentation. So think about it that way. If I want to create the best content for you in the world, I mean, my microphone is expensive, my headset's expensive, the camera that I'm using is expensive. All of this stuff, comes with the idea that I want to produce content that looks really good and does a really good job at coming across for the people that are watching. And if you want to do the same, you're going to have to explain to people, look, you need to do that. You want to have really thought through your intros and outros. So an intro is thank you for listening to XX podcast. This is how this is what we're going to talk about today. These are the key sort of themes that we cover in this show. That's an intro. An outro is thanks so much for listening. Here's how you subscribe. Please like the podcast. Please make sure that you let us know what episodes that you like the most. And so by doing that, you having those intros and outros with a little theme music, you provide kind of that commonality for your show. And then lastly, you want to have those clear, focused conversations. Now, look, I also, in terms of the intros and outros and the music and all that kind of stuff, there's a part of um, some folks that focus in on digital marketing and podcasts and things like that to say, hey, look, you don't need all that stuff. And I don't disagree. I want you to know that I sort of in my latest podcast, we just jump right into whatever the topic is. And so I don't have an intro or outro at this point in time. I may add an outro later where it just says, hey, like and subscribe and things like that. Sometimes it helps to remind people to click the button and just like and subscribe, which, by the way, if you haven't yet for this video, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel and let me know what you do and don't like in terms of the things that I cover. It really does help to inform me in terms of things that I should cover. You want to add value on every episode. So think about the way that you're going to conduct the interview in a way that people are going to walk away with actionable insights or takeaways. They're going to, hear honest stories. Maybe they're going to hear something that, sort of is gut wrenching or something that was a real tragedy for somebody, but you also want to provide that way out. What was the way that somebody found their way out of that situation and, move to the next thing? And by doing that, you're really establishing that level of consistency and trust, and that's what you want from the audience as well. There's so much more to cover in terms of things that you need to do to establish a podcast, and I want to be honest with everybody here, right? That look, the whole idea of this video is to get you started initially in podcasting and start thinking about that idea. Um, I will be covering the technology. I'll be covering, ways that you sort of build the automations and the emails and things like that in future um, videos. But I wanted to walk everybody through that. If you're interested in going much, much deeper, we have a community called the Digital Spotlight where we go much, much deeper. I talk about it a lot on my free community, which is the content and conversion community. And I want to provide everybody a way, no matter whether you're going the free route or the paid route, to at least get that initial value. And so the idea here today was to cover this initial topic and get us started on this journey. And like I said, in future videos, I'm going to cover the technology. We're going to talk more in depth about the automations that you need to build out in terms of inviting guests, but also in terms of just staying in touch with guests and how do you one, connect with them, but then two, how do I turn that into a longer term relationship and possibly turn it into a business deal as well. But if you think about this, you've got to have an outreach strategy. You've got to have a way to get that high value content that comes out. You're going to need somebody. If you're not doing it yourself, you're going to need a video editor or somebody to go through and edit the audio. There's some technology that you could use if you're doing it yourself that I'll cover in a future episode. We'll talk a lot about, how do you leverage this content going forward? You're creating great content. So now how do you use that and keep that momentum going forward for yourself? How do you promote episodes? how do you turn those insights into relationships? Because you have a relationship with your guest, but you have a bigger relationship with your audience. So think about, I mean, I just got the notification today that for Life Science Success, there's 45,000 views or something of all the episodes that we've had. I mean, just an amazing number there. And you want to be able to measure success. We'll talk a lot about metrics and things like that. Look, I wouldn't get hung up on the metrics. I'm building a channel right now here with D3 Digital. I've not done a lot of these videos in the past, so a lot of this stuff is fairly new for me because I haven't created a lot of content like this. But if you think about the way that I'm thinking about the future is that I would love to have a live audience. I'd love to have people that are liking and reacting to things as I'm going through it instead of, me just talking to a camera solo in a room. It's one of the reasons why I do these, live, even, and you might see outtakes if you watch the live version because my editor hasn't gone through it. And so my editor will go through this video, he'll take care of things, he'll hand it back. But I also wanted to just mention that in terms of metrics and success, I wouldn't get hung up on numbers to start. Look, you're going to start at zero. It's going to be lonely. You're going to have a lot of time where you're just talking by yourself or with a guest or carrying out your episodes. You have to do the execution to get to that. And I mean, one of the things that a lot of people, just don't talk about is how much time it takes offline and then how much does it take, whenever I'm in front of the camera or actually doing an episode. And then afterwards, there's somebody, that's actually editing the video, thankfully for me now. But I didn't start out that way. It was me. It was me, and me, right? Me getting guests, me doing the interview, me doing the editing. And eventually I got to a point where I was like, look, I think I can afford, getting an editor to do this. And I'm thankful for him. I mean, he's been a great part of the team for a number of years now. And, I really appreciate, all of my editor's help because without it, I wouldn't get to see the things that I get to see as well, because sometimes he sees videos in a different way than I do. And so, again, if this video has been helpful for you, please make sure that you like and subscribe. I really appreciate you being here. And, I just wanted to, share with everybody my journey with podcasting and share something that I feel has been extremely valuable for my business. Thanks.